Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining me as we click down these last few days of a Senate session. I hope everybody's getting in a holiday spirit, considering as much holiday spirit as can happen at this point with the virus still happening. I also want to put a note on the front end. I'm going to probably do one more of these early next week. Before everybody breaks for the holidays. I figure regardless of what happens, I may be able to add something in the news lull period between Christmas and New Year's. I wanted to hit on four topics briefly today, and then be happy to take your questions. First, as we all know, the Senate overwhelmingly passed the Defense Authorization Bill, so even with all the dysfunction, we have maintained this record that each year the defense bill gets fully passed. It had overwhelming margins. Critically important for Virginia. There was actually a plus up of about $24 billion above even what President Biden had requested. That's important for Virginia for a variety of reasons. For all our active duty service members, there is a 2.7% pay raise. It's important that we pay our men and women who protect us a fair wage, and that pay increase is important and significant. There's over $3 billion increased on the submarine program, on the Columbia class. So there'll be additional subs, and that means the backlog in terms of Huntington Ingalls is going to be filled for some times in terms of submarine construction. And I still believe subs in a 21st century defense environment are some of the most important things that we can invest in the realm of military hardware. You also know that I have been working. Some years we've made great progress. Some years we've seen that progress recede on military housing. We increased the basic housing and basic allowance for our military members. We've still got some room to go in terms of continuing to hold the private companies accountable, who still have, I think, way too long of contracts, but it is absolutely critical, particularly as we go into the holiday season, that our men and women we serve and their families can live in safe, non-infected, non-infested housing, and this is an issue that I'm going to continue to work on. One of the other things we've seen, combined with why we needed to do the pay raise for basic service members and the housing allowance, is that over the last year we've seen a number of our military families really experience food shortages and hunger. So there was a legislation I worked on with Tammy Duckworth that was included in the Defense Authorization Bill to make sure we start to address the problem of food shortages amongst our active duty troops. There's also another close to, I think, 200 additional, maybe the number's not 200, tens and tens of additional construction projects all across Virginia that will benefit our armed services, obviously, but as well benefit the overall economy in Virginia, since we're so reliant on defense spending. That was the first item. Second item, and this has started to attract more attention, is I think the absolute urgent need for Congress to step up and put in place basic federal protections in terms of our voting process. We have seen state after state start to roll back access to the ballot box. We've seen shortening of voting times in many states. That concerns me greatly, but what even concerns me more is certain states like Georgia and others who seem to be on this path where they're literally taking the ability for a nonpartisan or bipartisan independent commission to oversee the vote counting and the certification of the votes and turning that over to a partisan entity. That would be a recipe for disaster. Frankly, it would mean our very structure of democracy that I've grown up with, that you fight hard for your candidate, but then the votes are counted fairly and in an independent way, assessed and certified. That could be up for grabs. And while we've seen this take place in more red states, if that becomes a precedent, you could see it also happening in blue states. That is not good for America. As we saw in Virginia, Increased voter participation in Virginia. We saw an increase in voter participation that went up 25% in 2021 over 2017. That increased voter participation actually helped elect a Republican, Governor-elect Youngkin. So this idea that when more people vote, that is, I believe, good for overall democracy, not for any particular party, is something that's critically important. And unfortunately, I still remember when expanding voting rights was a bipartisan issue. That is not the case in today's United States Senate. So I am working with some of my colleagues to say, is there a path forward for that we actually enforce the filibuster and what I thought was the rules of the filibuster before I came to the Senate, that if you want to filibuster a bill, you've got to stand up and speak, that we could have a once-a-year process where a critical issue, as long as there was appropriate amendment process and still a requirement for a speaking filibuster, but where you could end up having a path to make sure that voting rights, which I think are extraordinarily important and under assault, get protected. I strongly support that, and again, there's active conversations on that topic. Two last comments before I turn it back to Laura for questions. One, I've led an effort with the regional delegation from Hampton Roads, Tim Kaine, Bobby Scott, Elaine Luria, to make sure that the Norfolk Stormwater Management Project could get funding. I've actually made calls as well. This is the immediate next step. We've got local money and state money. We need about another $20 million to take the next step of an ongoing process to make sure we've got appropriate resiliency. This is not going to fix all the problems of sea level rise in Norfolk, but it's an important first step, and I'm hopeful we may get some good news on that item. And finally, something that I announced earlier in the week, but I think it's really important. The Richmond Airport, along with 72 other airports around the country, the FAA was looking at basically shutting down the tower between midnight and 5 a.m. in the morning. That would have dramatically restricted air traffic into Richmond, those flights that arrive late, or the ability to kind of get out early. We managed to convince the FAA, based upon data and based upon some of the other activities that are happening at Richmond Airport, that would be a bad choice, and the FAA has announced that the Richmond Tower will stay open 24/7 to make sure that that air traffic, which is important not only for folks as they get close to visiting relatives around Christmas, but for the long-term economy of Richmond, is a very good piece of good news. And then finally, just want to reemphasize again, I'm very proud of what Governor Northam has done in terms of taking some of the earlier federal monies, $700 million that he has committed from some of the federal dollars that have flowed to the Virginia, to make sure that every community in Virginia can sign up for access to 100% high-speed internet broadband at an affordable price. We in Virginia are ahead of the game on that, and we've got another group of funding that's going to be coming down as we roll out the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which I was proud to be one of the key authors on. We can literally guarantee that every family in Virginia will have access to high-speed broadband at affordable rates delivered to them by the end of 2024. But to make that happen, because of supply chain issues and making sure we've got workforce issues addressed, the governor has been very bold at using some of these federal dollars already, with the expectation that there are more resources coming down the pike, coming out of the infrastructure plan. So with that, Laura, why don't I turn it over to you, and be happy to take some of the questions.
Our first question is going to be from Mike Gooding from WVEC.
Hiya, Senator. Happy
Hey, Mike.
birthday. A day late, by the way.
Thank you.
70s look very good on you.
Hey, that's fake news. Mike, I want all the rest of the reporters to know that is fake news. I'm still a robust just 67.
All right. Well, anyways, here's my question for you while my dog barks. Sorry about that. Let me step outside real quick. About the NDAA, it's a great blueprint, right? But it still needs to be appropriated. And we're under a continuing resolution until February 18th next year, maybe beyond. How worried are you that this appropriations process could mess up the entire NDAA as we go forward?
Well, Mike, I am worried. I am concerned. I mean, we've got some of my Republican friends who don't want to do a full appropriation process, because if you've got a continuing resolution, you're still operating off of the last Trump budget. And some of the policy changes that we've put forward wouldn't be implemented. But more directly, what it means to the NDAA is, even if you've got the basically increased funding, and if an appropriation goes up a little bit, if it's still spent on a continuing resolution basis, then, we may have a certain ship repair that's finished, and we need to transfer new funds to a new ship repair. That can't be done without what's called an anomaly change if you are still operating on the old budget. So the amount of costs that are built into using a continuing resolution. Remember, we're already about 4 months into the new year. We started October 1st on a federal fiscal year basis. If we wait till mid-February, where almost half of the fiscal year is done, and if that got extended, it's going to have huge implications for Hampton Roads, for the Navy, for our ability to maintain both new starts and ship repair. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that we get a full appropriations process, that we go ahead and do our job, do our work, not shut down the government, but also not continue to limp along with a continuing resolution.
Our next question is going to be from Tom Fitzgerald from WTTG. Tom? Okay, we're going to move on to Basil John with Nexstar.
Hey, Senator, how are you doing?
Basil, I've not seen you in ages. How are you?
I know, man. It's very different. I'm doing well. I'm married now, and happy birthday to you.
Congratulations. Do you still have your bird with you?
Yes, I do. He is sitting quietly, not bothering me right now.
Unlike Mike's dog. So, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No problem. So I wanted to talk to you about about COVID and the Omicron variant. Obviously, right now, what we're seeing from experts and from scientists, they're saying that even though this variant isn't exactly killing as many people as some of the other variants, it's still highly contagious and is causing a problem. Dr. Fauci is saying that he expects this to become the dominant variant in the United States, and we're seeing these cases pop up more in some schools. The latest that we saw is that in D.C. and in Prince George County, we've seen some cases pop up, and usually if things happen in Maryland and in D.C., it'll happen eventually in Northern Virginia. I wanted to get your thoughts on the situation with the Omicron variant. Do you think that the way that the federal government is going about right now with how it's handling the situation is the appropriate way? And do you think that we still need to have certain measures in place to make sure that the Omicron variant does not get out of control?
Well, I'm very worried about the Omicron variant. I heard from Dr. Fauci that the rate of penetration into the community is doubling every 2 days. And that just could mean that literally over the next 3 weeks, particularly as people get together around the holidays, that we could see a massive wave of COVID hit in January. Matter of fact, just yesterday in the United Kingdom, in England, they had the highest single day rate of COVID since the beginning of the whole crisis, literally back to March of 2020. Now, the good news is that Omicron, if you've got your vaccines, if you've got your boosters, seems to not have nearly the same negative effects. So we can get through this. But again, I just urge everyone, if not for yourself, do it for your neighbors, your families, your loved ones. If you don't have a vaccination, go get vaccinated. The level of severity of the virus, even Omicron, if you are unvaccinated, is exponentially higher. So do the right thing. This is for those of us who celebrate Christmas, this is the time of joy and a time of love. Show that love by getting vaccinated to your fellow man. And I feel that is the single biggest thing that we can do. I mean, I'm back to wearing my mask on a very regular basis. I know many group events, people are increasing testing again. I could imagine another wave coming. I think though, that we're going to have to figure out a way to live through these waves. This may be, in a certain sense, the new normal. And the best thing we can do on that is to be safe. And that starts with people getting vaccinated. The fact that the rates are double, triple, quadruple higher amongst unvaccinated people, I just don't know what additional evidence they need to see to do the right thing. How many more stories do you have to see of? I saw a family on one of the news channels the other day. The father, the mother, the small child were all in intensive care, and I think it was the mom was pleading she had not been vaccinated, didn't think it was going to hit them. She was pleading with all her friends who were not vaccinated to go out and do the right thing. This could be devastating to your family, particularly as we come around the holidays. And I do think the federal government approach, nobody likes, I know there's some pushback about vaccine mandates, but I am losing patience with those individuals who choose not to get vaccinated. They have that right. But I think we then, as a community, have a right to say, well, then you shouldn't go to a restaurant, you shouldn't go to a theater. And I think responsible employers say we want to make sure we've got a safe workforce and a safe workplace, because we oftentimes talk about the rights of the unvaccinated, and they have that right. But what about the rights of the folks who are afraid to go to a workplace because they're afraid they might get sick? So this is at the end of the day, government can only do so much. People have to take it upon themselves, and I call upon any type of leaders. I particularly call, as we think about going into the Christmas season, faith leaders to speak up and urge your congregations to do the right thing and get vaccinated.
Our next question is going to be from
Senator.
Mitchell Miller from WTOP. Mitchell?
Good morning, Senator.
Hey, Mitchell.
And congratulations on your birthday. I heard that the CBO actually scored your 67 at a 37. So
Oh, man. You'll get whatever answer you want, Mitchell, for that kind.
I wanted to ask you a question about January 6th. I've been talking to various lawmakers in connection with various issues related to it. You co-sponsored the legislation that passed in the defense bill allowing the Capitol Police Chief to request help from the National Guard without approval from the Capitol Police Board. Given that it's been nearly a year since January 6th, are you satisfied with steps that have been taken from a security and logistical standpoint to make sure the Capitol is better protected in the event of future threats, whatever they may be?
I think we've made record investments in additional training and additional hiring of the Capitol Police. And I think the Capitol Police deserve a lot of kudos for their protection of the Capitol, for the protection. I was on the floor of the Senate on January 6th. I still think about that one Capitol Police officer who led the insurrectionists away from the Senate floor. There could have been much more damage, much more violence. You could have had members of the Senate killed if those folks who were out for blood had broken onto the Senate floor with the Senate still in session. And candidly, most of these insurrectionists were about tearing things down. They didn't care whether you were Democrat or Republican. They just wanted to evoke violence. So I think the Capitol Police we've made additional investments. I think it's very appropriate that we included the ability for the Capitol Police to call in the National Guard if they need additional help. God forbid something like this happens again without going through a lot of bureaucratic hoops. I think there were efforts, frankly, that slowed that response on January 6th, and I hope the House committee can expose that. I think we need better coordination. This is what I've been pushing as the chairman of the Intelligence Committee to make sure that the Capitol Police has access to the intelligence that the FBI or other intelligence agencies may have if we see activity and chatter over the internet. I think there's still some challenges in terms of what went wrong on January 6th in terms of the past leadership of the Capitol Police. I think there's still a lot of questions about particularly House members, whether they were, how involved they were in the insurrection. I still find it chilling that the parliamentarian's office, where these folks who were responsible for making sure the electoral votes were actually protected, they did their job at great potential risk to bodily harm, that the parliamentarian's office was totally trashed in a way that no other office was trashed on the Capitol. And there was clearly some evidence that people were being shown the parliamentarian's office by so-called tour groups in the days leading up to January 6th. So there's still a lot of questions that the House panel, I think, needs to uncover. But I do think we've made progress. And one of the things, Mitchell, we have to balance is in this world where unfortunately too many of our fellow Americans have endorsed the Trump big lie about voting fraud, which again, one more study came out from the AP just the other day showing in the 5 states, I believe, that were closest, that swung to President Biden, there was roughly 470 examples of potential voter fraud, and some of the ones that were exposed were people who were voting multiple times for Donald Trump. But the fact is, too many people still believe that lie, and I think it is really important that people in both parties speak truth so that we can beat down the big lie, and that is one of the things that also can make the Capitol safer. And finally, on this topic, I just, whether it's dealing with COVID, whether it's dealing with the challenges of people who seem committed to following the Trump big lie and consequently are willing to put our democracy at risk, we've got to balance those still very real concerns with, I believe, the necessity to, as quickly as possible, as safely as possible, get the Capitol reopened. This is the people's Capitol. Our democracy functions best when Americans can see us not just on television over the internet, but how we do our job or don't do our job that well, and people can come up and express their concerns on bills. I'm hoping we can move towards that reopening. Again, we've got to do it subject to how we can keep the people up here who work here, not just senators and congressmen, safe, but all of the staff and the other people who maintain this incredible building. But I do think we got to work towards that.
Our next question will be from Chelsea King from ABC 13.
Senator, happy birthday to you. Hope you ate plenty of cake.
Thank you.
On Monday, Governor Northam put out some proposals for his next budget. Some include proposing tax cuts. In Virginia, the outgoing governor can create a legislative agenda which the incoming governor has to deal with. Now, a member of Governor-elect Glenn Youngkin's transition team says this needs to change. I want to hear her perspective. Do you think it's fair and does it need to change?
Well, I know, even when I was governor, we've been trying for years to cut back the sales tax on groceries, on food. And I think now is an appropriate time again to grapple with this issue, because that's where inflation is hitting most people's pocketbooks the most, that and the price of gasoline. So finding a way we lowered the sales tax on food when I was governor by a few cents when we did our tax reform effort. Governor Northam, and I know Governor-elect Youngkin, has talked about taking it down the last, I believe, 2.5 cents and getting rid of it. But some of those dollars go to localities. Those dollars that come to the state, they're all transferred to the locality. So I do think it is essential that we don't cut off that aid to schools and localities that those funds sponsor. I hope there needs to be a replacement. I also think it's a little bit ironic that, yes, Virginia has weathered COVID better than most states, and I give a tribute to the governor, Governor Northam, and the legislators of both parties. But one of the things that has really made the state surplus so much bigger is the $4.3 billion that came from the American Rescue Plan, passed by only Democrats in the Congress, put forward by President Biden. And for so many of my Republican friends who, argued against that last COVID investment, that last jumpstart to our economy, now to say because the Commonwealth is flush, we're going to use this for cutting taxes. There's more than a little bit of irony in that. And I also would say this, we do have abundant resources right now, but I firmly believe we need to look at this over the long haul. We have a lot of needs in Virginia that still have not been met. I think some short-term tax relief, particularly around the sales tax on groceries, may be appropriate. But I would also say we have this once-in-a-generation moment where the Commonwealth is flush, where there may be additional dollars coming in on infrastructure. What are those big needs that we have not taken on? And I hope Governor-elect Youngkin and his partners in the legislature think about those long-term needs as well as what kind of short-term relief, and particularly on the sales tax on food, that can be delivered.
Our next question will be from Tom Fitzgerald from WTTG. Tom? Okay, we're moving on to Amy Knowles with the Virginia Dogwood.
Hey, Senator Warner, thanks for taking our questions.
Thank you,
and
Amy.
Happy birthday yesterday. I hope you were able to have a lot of tuna melt.
Well, I'll tell you, I will give away what my staff gave me. They gave me an industrial strength size, restaurant size, I'm not sure how many pounds, of Duke's mayonnaise with a Duke's cookbook. So I took it home, and my wife said, she's not that much of a mayonnaise fan, so she said I have to keep this someplace other than our refrigerator. So I'm searching now for a home for a industrial size vat of Duke's mayonnaise.
Well, I mean, hey, it's the gift that keeps on giving.
Amen.
But as far as the question for today, I was curious, how is the Build Back Better plan's paid family and medical leave different from FMLA or sick days that some Virginians already benefit from?
Great question. And obviously the Build Back Better paid family medical leave is at this point somewhere between a 4 and 6 week initiative. The existing paid family medical leave programs mostly apply simply to larger companies. Many companies already have those benefits in place. I know I was very proud a few years back to put in place a 12-week family medical leave for moms for the intelligence community, and that then got expanded to the whole federal government. So what the Build Back Better program is trying to do is, how do you fill in the gaps between what's already offered to the federal government, already offered to large employers? How do you get those smaller employers and companies that may not be able to afford all of this? And some of those dollars that go to that paid family medical leave program are help provide that subsidy to some of the companies that otherwise might not be able to afford it. But as you know, the whole Build Back Better program, we're not going to get it done before Christmas. Part of that is because there's still outstanding issues with a couple of my friends on the Democratic side in terms of the substance. But also, even if we had all those issues resolved, the intricacies of what's called reconciliation, which requires the parliamentarian to go through what's both a scrub process and then a bath process. And don't ask me to explain the difference between those two, because I'm not 100% sure, but it has to be dealt with committee by committee, and the parliamentarian has not finished all her rulings on the parts that have even been agreed to. So just process-wise, we couldn't get it done before Christmas. My hope is we can come back and get this resolved. I understand, particularly Senator Manchin, some of his concerns that we ought to be doing, and I frankly echoed some of these concerns last summer, that I wish this initiative had been more targeted to fewer programs with a longer time horizon, rather than a whole wish list of programs that some of which we could only do for a year or two. So I think there will be a bit of a timeout on this, and maybe some rethinking, but there clearly is the need to get this done. And boy, oh boy, with a lot of families, whether it is family medical leave, or whether it's child care, whether it's universal pre-K. We talk about how we can get inflation down. Well, one of the ways we can get inflation down is getting more people back into the workforce. We still have lots of workers, particularly women workers, who have not been able to get back into the workplace because they can't find child care. And I think this is both morally the right thing to do and one of the many tools we could use to try to drive down inflation.
And that was all the time we had, so that will be our last question. Thank you all for joining.
Thanks, everybody. I hopefully get to one more of these, and if you can't tune in, have a happy holidays. Thanks so much.